opportunities to practice our DBQ skills. So let's start with DBQ Worksheet 3. Let me share it here. All right, there we go. Okay, so really this was I hope you guys are super clear. This is just the exact same skills last week, using the documents as evidence. Just the way that this worksheet was structured, it's just sort of reminding you that the best way to discuss the documents, when possible, is to group them if you feel like more than one document is kind of giving you the same answer. Now listen, you don't have to group them. Now that you guys have seen the rubric, like it's not a required point. Just if you do group them, it just helps you to structure your paper. It saves you time. It shows a deeper understanding of the documents, which might help you get that last point, okay? So really this was just more practice using evidence from the documents, but if you are able to group them, it kind of could really make your paper more to that upper tier of quality. Okay, so this one was our prompt on the Industrial Revolution. How did it impact the lives of women and children? When you read these two documents, hopefully you saw they were saying that there were some positive effects on women. In this case, women had an opportunity to work and make an income when otherwise they would have been stuck in a life of poverty on a farm. So that's what this answer is going to help us say. What I'm going to show you with each of our 4 examples here is the fact that basically this is the paragraph. Like this is like if you were writing a DBQ in response to that prompt, this right here that you were looking at would be one of your body paragraphs. It would just need to be about that long. And I want you to notice that each of these is going to be like that. It's going to start off with just a topic sentence to kind of connect it back to the prompt or the thesis. And then you just discuss the documents. You don't have to go on and on and on about each document. So right here, the topic sentence would be, while the Industrial Revolution had many negative effects, sometimes it had positive effects. For example, it gave women opportunities for employment. There you go. That's like the topic sentence. And let's discuss both documents to support that. In Japan, we saw that women who were able to secure factory jobs made more to support and keep their families going than farmers in the area made in an entire year. That was in document 2. And likewise in China, women and girls who went to work in factories were able to supplement their family's farming income, even gain some independence from the control of their that's it. That's all you need. You notice how I brought up both documents, used them both as evidence to support that point of women had more opportunities for employment and can contribute to their families. Okay, this prompt, just like I think it's been true all 3 weeks now, I think this has been the hardest prompt and the hardest documents. So if you struggle with number 2, you are not alone. Here the prompt was the causes of nationalism. Causes of nationalism. Here's a patriotic song from the French Revolution era, and here is a memorandum by a Tokugawa family member right after the, if you notice the year, 1853, that might have triggered you to think, oh yeah, this was right after Commodore Perry and the American visit to Tokyo to try and force them open to trade. By the way, this document, this Tokugawa document, I think it's very hard to understand. I think that whoever edited this document did a very poor job editing it. And it's really not clear whether he's pro opening up Tokyo or against it. So like I had to reread it a bunch of times. I even went and found the longer version of this document like online somewhere in some book about Japan to kind of just get more context of really what it was saying. So again, if you struggle with this one, not alone. Anyway, my initial instinct was right, and I did have, even though I did have to look up a little bit more about it, and he's against foreigners. So let's just go to the paragraph and I'll show you what I mean. So here's my topic sentence. Another reason nationalism arose, or another cause of nationalism around the world at this time, was a result of national leaders invoking promises of danger or threats around which to rally their people. So basically, nationalism was caused by seeing dangers or threats to your country, something like that. So with the threats of invaders or tyrants to rally against, government leaders were able to unify their people and create a national identity. So again, lots of different ways to phrase that, but I think with this French revolutionary song, this is about, we have to rally together to fight off, we have to rally together, children of this fatherland, to protect your children, protect your fields, fight for liberty, fight against those tyrants and hired soldiers coming here to get us. So nationalism was caused by a sense of a threat from the outside. So I was able to kind of tie Tokugawa to that too. Here, he's talking about how the people of Japan right here, stand firmly united and complete our military preparations. So here he's saying Japan should come together, be united, experience nationalism to fight off these foreign Westerners that want to come in, whether it's the Dutch or whether it's, of course, the Americans who literally just did that. So to continue, we saw this in France, where French Revolution leaders called out to the people to join the French cause against cruel tyrants and mercenaries. The same was true in Japan, where Tokugawa Nariaki is responding to these foreign demands to open up Japan to trade. In response, he says that Japan should come together and make traditional military preparations for war to expel the foreigners. So nationalism caused by outside threats, and these documents support that. Okay, our third prompt was the one about how did Christianity change Latin America 1500 to 1800. Both of these documents are a little on the longer side, a little more wordy, but they're very similar to what we saw last week. They're about how the natives, when they weren't being closely watched by the Spanish, continued to practice their traditional rituals and beliefs. And oftentimes they would also do some Christian practices and beliefs. So they kind of did a mixture of both. It was more kind of superficial Christian stuff when they were around Spanish priests, and then they did their native stuff when they were alone. It's probably the most simple way to put it. And I think both of these documents support that. So if you were, so you would basically talk about both of these two documents together in the same paragraph, because they both have the same idea about how they maintained some native practices, something like that, or about how they mixed Christian theology with native beliefs to create syncretism. That'd be another way to approach this. Either way, it's both of these documents are pointing you in the same direction and should be discussed in the same paragraph. You could say, in Mexico, a Catholic priest wrote about this when he described local Amerindian populations worshiping the Lord and performing sacraments, even as they continued to hold to nature veneration and animal sacrifice that they had practiced prior to the arrival of Catholicism. That was in document 3. This account was reinforced by Native Americans who testified in document 4, that even as people in their village were making confession with Catholic priests and worshiping in churches, they continued to sacrifice animals just as they did prior to Christianity coming. So again, the topic sentence here is that they held on to their native beliefs and just picked up some Christian beliefs also. We just said 1 or 2 sentences about each of these 2 documents and how they said that. I hope you guys agree with me. Like, all I am is just paraphrasing in my own words what these are saying, right? I'm not looking for hidden meanings. I'm not doing deep analysis. I'm really just trying very hard not to quote the exact words of this and put it in my own words, what the native practices still look like. Okay, and our last set for this week was the one about African responses to European imperialism. We had this same document from last week and then one new one, a German military officer reporting on the Maji Rebellion in East Africa in 1905. Now, notice how last week when we just did this document 2 in isolation, we talked about how, or at least my first reading of it was, one way that Europeans responded to imperialism was they practiced diplomacy to try and reach out to the Europeans. By the way, still 100% totally true. That is one way to interpret this document. However, what does this document and this document have in common? If you were going to group them, put them in the same body paragraph, which you don't have to do, to say that again. But if you did group them and put them in the same paragraph, what would that sound like? To me, a good topic sentence would be, one category of European imperialism was sometimes, or excuse me, one category of African response to European imperialism was turning to religion. That's the broad category here. How did they turn to religion to deal with this problem? So for example, in Ethiopia, we saw this when Emperor Menelik specifically mentions God and Jesus and how they're going to be on the side of Ethiopia and help restore their territory. They believe that God and Jesus will protect Ethiopia if threatened in document 2. Same thing was happened in Germany and East Africa. These military officers reported that they saw the African peoples worshiping their local spirits and praying to their local gods, hoping to make them invincible, maybe even impervious to bullets, so that they could rise up in rebellion against the Europeans. In fact, just on a random note, when you read that, to me, sounds a lot like the Boxer Rebellion. The same thing, the Boxer Rebellion did like these Taoist-inspired, like Chinese calisthenics that they thought had mystical power that would make them impervious to bullets. Also, it makes me think of the Haitian Revolution, because the Haitian Revolution back in the early days started as there was a slave uprising on the island, and the slave uprising kind of had its roots back to this large gathering in the forest with this voodoo ritual, kind of inspired everybody to rise up, thinking they'd be like divinely inspired to rise up against their masters. So apparently that's been a theme, is you respond to imperialism and oppression by turning to religious beliefs, thinking that you can become divinely inspired and they'll help make you successful. Okay, so there you go. So to recap, this week was the exact same as last week. Can you read these documents, use it to support a thesis? Sorry. Can you see my son?
Wait, who's...
Yeah, Dean, my class. Okay, back on track. Anyway, like I said, it's just using the documents as evidence to support a thesis. And a best practice is to try and group them in paragraphs like this, because it reinforces their meaning. It kind of saves you time. And it just helps your paper to be more organized and show more sophistication, which can be that last point. Okay, so when we get to the end, let me know if you guys have any questions about that. So to further our practice of evidence, let's now share the other practice sheet from today. And so hopefully you guys were able to follow the instructions or understand what I meant. I just wanted you to take your paragraph from last week and bold the thesis, right? So you 100% know the rest of your paper you were spending trying to support that thesis with evidence. And I told you could use your own. A lot of you guys had very good ones, or you could use mine. So mine was, in the period 1450 to 1750, central governments came to wield significant power over their empires by establishing military superiority. They found ways to limit the power of nobles and other elites, and they won favor by patronizing the arts. So obviously, I hope you guys obviously know that you would actually be writing actual paragraphs in response to that. You would have 2 or 3 paragraphs supporting that. I just wanted you to be super clear with what skill we were practicing, and we just made it bullet points. But please know you cannot write in bullet points on the day of. You're going to have to write paragraphs. We're just practicing today with these bullet points. Okay, so document 1 was that document about the European missionary who was in the court of Shah Abbas of the Safavid dynasty. So how does that support this thesis? You could say, Father Simon's report from the court of Shah Abbas reveals that the Shah had an impressive and highly trained military. The soldiers were a standing army, paid throughout the year. They were trained in the use of gunpowder weapons. Every single thing I just wrote there is 100% in the documents in black and white. That required no outside knowledge, no analysis. All I did was take that document and put up my own words, right? I'm just trying to prove this part of my thesis, that rulers consolidated their power through a strong military. So how does that document show us that they had a strong military? He talks about how they had 100,000 guys. He talks about how they were trained in muskets. He talked about how they were very skilled. He talked about how they were paid year round, so they could be professional soldiers, right? So all I did was just try and put that in my own words. Okay, the next part of my thesis is these rulers tried to limit the power of nobles. Okay, so how am I going to prove that with document 2? The European ambassador in the court of Suleiman notes that the Sultan is surrounded by people with important titles and offices. What is remarkable is that these people were given their posts due to merit. What does that mean? Meaning they deserve the post based on talent and hard work and honesty. He did not automatically give the most important jobs to the nobility. So instead, when he hired men of talent, he was able to consolidate his power and strengthen his central government. This means that there are the nobles are not super strong by automatically getting all the best jobs in the military and the bureaucracy and in the courts. And of course, he's able to have really talented people working for him instead of like lazy, dishonest, selfish nobles, basically. I thought document 3 had the same idea. So if it was me, I would have grouped document 2 and 3 and put them in the same paragraph. Another way that governments tried to limit the power of their nobles was shown by Peter the Great's decree in document 3. Peter the Great's decree further demonstrates a government attempt to limit the power of the nobles. He required all the nobility to learn math from a government teacher. Nobles who did not comply would not be allowed to marry, which would mean they could not continue their noble line, and that's like the worst thing that could happen. So that's it, nice and to the point. I didn't have to add any outside knowledge. Peter the Great is trying to put more direct government oversight over these nobles. Okay, document 4 was one we actually read in class. If you, I guess that was maybe in January. So hopefully you were able to handle this one. How does document 4 support that thesis? Hideyoshi's Edict on the Collection of Swords is about both strengthening the central government's military power and limiting the power of the nobles. How so? The decree forbids any farmer from owning a weapon and requires the heads of the provinces and the samurai to collect weapons and turn them into Hideyoshi's government. So this means that very few people outside of Hideyoshi's army will have weapons. And it means that nobles won't be able to arm their peasants to rise up in rebellion. All of that was in black and white in the documents. I just put it in my words. I tried really hard to not add any outside knowledge here. I really wanted to use the word daimyo instead of the heads of provinces or nobles, but I didn't want to put daimyo to prove that you can do this even without adding outside knowledge. There would be a great opportunity to do outside knowledge here. If you wanted to, you could say the heads of provinces were these nobles called daimyo. And Japan had been historically feudal. And these daimyo were large landowners with lots of power. And they had recently risen up in rebellion, and they had gone through a long period of civil war. So Hideyoshi was all about trying to crack down on that and take weapons away from them. And if you did that, that's obviously fabulous outside knowledge, or it's context for sourcing. Okay, finally, document 5 was this one, the painting of Kangxi, and the source line tells us that he went on a tour of southern China, went to all the big cities, and sponsored a bunch of works of art. So you could say one way rulers consolidated their power is through winning the favor of the people through sponsoring the arts. This scroll of Kangxi was just one of many artistic projects that the emperor paid for during his tour of the country. By supporting art projects, Kangxi could have won the favor of groups like artists, poets, scholars, or city leaders. Or you could have just said this: art serves to show off the power and legitimacy of the ruler. How so, right? Well, like if a ruler pays for beautiful literature or poetry or art or architecture, and the country improves culturally under their rule, you know, the ruler can take credit for that. The ruler can say, look at me, I am the giver of beautiful culture to my people by paying for it. So that is how they increase their legitimacy and their power, by saying, I am the giver of beautiful culture to my people. Okay? And then I got really excited for this last part. I really hope that you guys just sat there for a couple of minutes and thought, oh man, are there any other examples of how rulers consolidated their power during this time? There's only 5 short documents here, right? There are definitely other answers to that question that we're missing. And so I really hope you guys were able to think of a couple of them. So let's reveal it. A further way the Ottoman sultans consolidated their power in this period was through the formation of the Janissary Corps. The Ottoman Sultan, now if I just stopped right there and just kind of name dropped the word Janissaries, it wouldn't count. You have to explain what the Janissaries are. The Ottoman Sultan would require Christian families in the Balkans to pay tribute in the form of young males that would be trained for military and bureaucratic service. They were trained to be highly loyal and effective soldiers and servants of the Sultan. That's it. Of course, there's many other examples, but I wish I could see your hands right now, but how many of you thought of the Janissaries and did that for your outside evidence? Okay, another piece of outside evidence was religious rituals were a common way for rulers to consolidate and show off their power. For example, in the Aztec Empire, the emperor sponsored the building of massive pyramids and helped to preside over rituals of human sacrifice. It was widely believed that these rituals helped to appease the gods, making the ruler an essential link between humans and the divine. I know that like in China, they did, the emperors would participate in like ancestor worship rituals and like mandate of heaven rituals. So that's obviously the same thing. You could have mentioned that instead. So explaining religious rituals. Now that's not it. What are some other things? I just did a list here that are examples of how rulers consolidated their power, 1450 to 1750, the land empires. So you could say the theory of the divine right of kings, as promoted by guys like James I or Peter the Great or Louis XIV. The idea of absolutism, I am the state, and the king gets to make every decision ultimately. The building of Versailles or Taj Mahal, so architecture to show off their wealth and power. Document 5 was a painting, but if you gave us an example of architecture for the rulers to show off their wealth and power and say that they are the giver of a great culture to their people. You could have mentioned a guy like Akbar, his policies of tolerance and cooperation with the Hindus and the Christians of India. That's an example of consolidating their power. Rulers demanding tribute, or like the kowtow when you came to the Chinese emperor, things like that. If you said the Mongols demanded tribute, you would be wrong. Mongols are not in this period. So just that's why dates matter, right? So If you did this example of demanding tribute, you would have to give examples from this period, not the Mongols. If you struggled with this, if you sat there for 2 or 3 minutes and you could not think of another example, all of these ideas came from 3.2 in the AMSCO books. So Unit 3 was our land empires, 1450 to 1750, and topic 2 was how did rulers use a variety of methods to legitimize and consolidate their power. So there you go. The AMSCO book is, of course, directly speaks to the test, and this practice DBQ prompt was all about that theme, topic 3.2 in the AMSCO books. That pretty much leads me to the end of today's discussion. So once again, guys, this was just a recap of how to use evidence to back up your thesis. A best practice is to group documents into the same paragraph, but you don't have to. Today we practice with more bullet points, but obviously you would have to write actual paragraphs. But the paragraphs don't have to be long. So all the examples we showed today were about, kind of how long the paragraphs need to be. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys got a chance to as far as we're not going to get into it today, but I hope you guys saw that there's just a link I posted with just some of those videos about kind of what the test day will look like in 3 weeks from now. And make sure your email address is all squared away. And if you have any questions, just email me on the side. And we will get into some of that later. We're going to do our last worksheets next week. And then we'll just do one last practice DBQ the week before. But anyway, we'll get into that. So let me just check the chat now. If you guys want to type up any questions, or feel free to unmute and ask me anything about really anything. The format of the AP test, the rubric, or anything you heard today. Okay, no news is good news. What time period are you guys rooting for the DBQ to be from? I wonder what time period you feel most comfortable with. Between 1 through 6. Last week we practiced context and thesis, so that's 2. This week we practiced 5 rubric points. You get 5 rubric points from evidence. So we have practiced 7 of the rubric points just in the last 2 weeks. Next week we will do sourcing, which you can get 2 points from. That's 9 of the 10 right there. And then there's just that elusive 10th point if your essay is really complex and sophisticated, which is hard to practice without writing a full one, which we haven't done yet. So just to be clear, guys, two rubric points right there in your first paragraph, and then 5 points for evidence. Just if you can correctly support your thesis with 4 documents, that's 3 evidence points right there. And then bringing in some outside knowledge could be 1 or 2 more. So I hope we can do that. Okay, so there's some questions coming in. One question is how conclusion or summing up. So my way of answering this is twofold. As you guys now know, in the rubric, there are 10 points. None of the rubric points are student must write a conclusion. So you absolutely 100% do not have to write a concluding paragraph or sum it up. Especially given how much you have to do in these 45 minutes. You're going to have to discuss 4 or 5 documents and contextualize and source, and of course have time to read the documents and figure them out. I highly, highly doubt any of you guys will have time for some sort of conclusion or summary paragraph, and that's just not needed. If you did somehow have time left over, I mean, what I used to teach was in your concluding paragraph, you could just restate your thesis in different words, but I mean, listen, you're probably not going to have time. So the good thing is you don't need one. Okay, I'm getting lots of votes for 1200 to 1450, and I'm getting an equal amount for 1750 to 1900. So nobody likes the stuff in the middle. Nobody likes 1450 to 1750. Oh man. One person said 2000 to 2020. Well, good luck with that. Okay, again, thank you guys so much for joining. Any other questions? Would love to hear from you. Questions, comments? Okay, I expect the same plan next week. We'll finish off the Dbq worksheets by practicing sourcing and thesis. We will add to our Dbq for a third time, but we're just going to add 2 sourcing attempts. So that's really it. And then for our last meeting together on 5/15, there won't be any new worksheets. There won't be any new review videos. The only thing we'll be doing on 5/15 is you guys can join me and we'll write a 45-minute Dbq and then go over it afterwards. So that's the only thing in the lesson plan for 5/15, just so you know. Cool, but if there's no other questions, then thank you guys so much for joining. I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. And you guys have an awesome weekend. Talk to you later. Okay, you can leave now. So party's over. There's still 5 people left. Go away so I can close it.